a bunch of times. They all said it was the closest to ECW that they had felt. I mean, we even had the Dudley Boys as the tag team champions for a little bit. I wasn't at this particular show because I was injured. This guy at a show up in Watertown just happened to show up to watch. Wanted to watch from the back. Some Canadian guy, Edge, you might have heard of him, just showed up at a 2CW show in Watertown because he heard it was the thing to watch, and he made the trip down from Toronto to go to a 2CW show and hang out in the back with the guys. So you're talking WWE Hall of Famer at a 2CW show just to check it out. Like, that was the kind of notoriety that Fed had, and it was just a crazy ride, and best 10 years that we could have had.
Yeah, 2CW had a legit buzz, which, you know, now it's kind of commonplace for there to be a handful of feds across the country that have a little bit of that buzz. But again, this predates all of them. I think PWG was up and running in California, but outside of them, I mean, you know, you had Ring of Honor, you had TNA and WWE, but 2CW was really it, like the pinnacle for, you know, independent wrestling. The closest to it was maybe AIW in Cleveland, but even they were a far distance away from, you know, the type of influence that TCW had. I only got to attend a few shows. I know I came to visit you a few times back home in upstate New York. Yes, and but I saw one of the final shows where they had the Young Bucks and Kenny Omega and Dalton Castle and just a ton of just tremendous talent. Before, you know, this is before being the elite, before All Elite Wrestling, and just that atmosphere was unbelievable. During that period of time with 2CW, when I first knew Steve Kruz, he was Mr. One Night Stand, but eventually he went from being a singles competitor to primarily a tag team specialist with your partner Steve McKenzie. And if you would, yes, if you would be so kind, if you could give some detail on that tag team, how it came to be, and a little bit about that run, because that was a pretty healthy chunk of your career.
So the Killer Steves were born. Studley claims that he was on a show with me for NWA Upstate when we ran at the dojo in Rochester, the little dojo shows. He claims we were on a show together and we met there. I don't remember it, but I also took a lot of chair shots to the head of my career, so it's not surprising that I don't remember it. Studley and I got paired up at UWA Ringmasters for the sole reason it was Colin Olson, another 2CW guy, you might have heard of him, that ended up in WWE, and Jimmy Olsen. They wanted to work. They knew me. I had known those guys a long time because I had been out in Rochester for a bit as a singles wrestler. They picked me, and they put me with Studley that night because we were both named Steve. We both said we were from Florida, and we were both wearing yellow and black. And Studley was super skinny. Well, he's always super skinny, except for his massive calves that he has. And we didn't have a team name for the first couple of times, and our gimmicks didn't really, you know, he was Studley Steve. He wasn't Studley Steve McKenzie yet. But we had the banter right off the bat of, you know, at the time Studley used to have a long goatee and I was clean shaven. We were always opposite. I was a little built and tan, and he was kind of pasty and not built, and he had long hair and I had short hair, and I had tattoos and he didn't, and he had long facial hair and I was almost clean shaven. We were always the opposite. So we wrestled, we teamed up a couple of times, and then Strangler Steve King said, we're doing a tag team tournament and you guys are going to be a tag team, so come up with a name. And remember what I told you about UWA, our whole 12 fan base.
Yes.
So I was being a typical smart ass, and there are the posters in the back of WWF tag teams, and I'm like, we'll be Demolition. He's like, come on, guys, be serious. I'm like, all right, we'll be Heart Foundation. He's like, dude, seriously. I'm like, I'm looking around for posters. I'm like, oh, Strike Force. We're Strike Force. And he's like, guys, come on, be serious. He's like, just come up with a name. And I'm like, we're wearing yellow and black. We're the Killer Bees. And Studley goes, we're the Killer Steves. And Strangler goes, fine. And he walked away. And that's how we got the name the Killer Steves.
Awesome.
So we went out and we just had like instant chemistry. We did a lot of goofy spots. We kind of got known for doing goofy stuff in the ring. And our first road show out of UWA was for NWA Cyberspace. And I remember watching All Money is Legal in the dark match on that show. I say dark match on an indie. They were getting a tryout that night. I remember looking at Studley. We were watching them. I'm like, dude, we can't keep up with them. What the hell are we doing here? And we were working the Solution that night. And basically got destroyed by the Solution, which is what the intent was. And that night, Jack Molson, who was part booker or whatever for WSW World Star Wrestling in Pennsylvania with Johnny Glitter, saw us and saw All Money, and he would call us, he was a lumberjack, Jack Molson, he would call us the Stevies, and he called All Money Emil, because they always abbreviated their name, All Money is Legal, AMIL, and he liked the Stevies and Emil, and he brought us into World Star, and that's the first time we worked Murda and Pusha, and we had instant chemistry with them. And it was really the beginning of the Steves was almost the same time as the beginning of the feud with All Money is Legal, and we just made names for ourselves wherever we went. We ended up, these two little-known tag teams were main eventing shows. Hazleton, Pennsylvania. Studley and I couldn't eat in Hazleton. We had to leave town directly after our match and drive like an hour before we could stop at a Waffle House because we were hated. I had my tires slashed outside of a show.
That's a true heel. A true heel.
So, Studley and I went everywhere. We worked up in Canada, all over New York, Pennsylvania, Jersey, Vermont, worked everywhere. We got to work a bunch of great teams, whole bunch of indie tag teams. We got to be in the ring with Spike and Guido. There was one show we did in Pennsylvania for Bud Carson, Warren Bud, and it was an ECW reunion show. And they kept telling us that me, Studley, and Springgate were going to work the BWO. And Nova had just got out of WWE as Simon Dean. And we had already done, like, training seminars with Nova, out in Rochester and stuff like that. We did a bunch of seminars with a whole bunch of people. And but we didn't believe this match was going to happen. And even when we got there and we talked out the match with Stevie, Nova, and Meanie, we still didn't believe it was going to happen. I mean, it was surreal because here it is, we're talking over this match with BWO, and Scott Hall's walking around the locker room.
Wow.
Franchise is walking around the locker room like it was ECW. Axel. I can't remember if it was Balls or Axel. One of them was there. It was nuts. Like we didn't belong there. But we went out there and we went to the ring first, and then BWO's music hit. And I look at something and go, I guess this is happening. We got to work them. We got to work Demolition, Axe and Smash for 2CW. That was one of my last matches before my back surgery was against Demolition. I mean, couldn't be happier with results that Studley and I had. 2CW tag titles always eluded us through injury, or I moved to South Carolina for a bit. But, the man's one of my best friends. We've been through every match together. We drove countless hours and hundreds of thousands of miles for shows, and it was just we were literally thrown together just because of the colors in our names, and it just worked. I don't know why, but it worked.
Man, so sometimes fate, destiny, whatever you want to call it, but ultimately, man, it's that chemistry, man. You hear a lot of people talk about chemistry when it comes to, you know, what we do inside of a ring, or, you know, even you know, doing commentary or just being on screen together. But when you have good chemistry with somebody, it makes wrestling so much more enjoyable, both with somebody on your same side of the ring as well as with whoever you are opposing on the opposite side of the ring, a la the tag team All Money is Legal, which, you know, again, a hell of a tag team. A team that, you know, surprisingly didn't end up doing more in the business. But while you were just talking about the Killer Steves, your time with Studley, Steve McKenzie, you talked about the back injury and the subsequent back surgery, which, when we say back surgery, we're not talking about, not that there's any mild back surgery, but the back surgery you had, Steve Kruz, was incredibly serious, man. I mean, I remember communicating with you showing me pictures of your back healing. I mean, it was no joke, man. You know, this is the reality of pro wrestling, is that, you know, regardless of what role you play, if you are participating in or around that ring, you risk serious injury. So just to give some gravity to the situation, if you will, please tell or talk about with the listeners the back surgery, the back injury, and the recovery from that.
So I had a herniated, bulged, and ruptured disc between L5 and S1. So very common back injury in sports. For biology purposes, right at the base of your back, kind of like where your belt hits. Assuming you don't wear your pants up around your armpits like some people do today.
Like Abdullah.
What's that?
Like Abdullah.
Oh, yeah. No happy pants here. These are like normal pants down, you know, around my waist where my beer belly hangs over the belt buckle.
I got you.
So my L5S1, luckily, oddly enough, it's right where the incision started is right at the bottom of my tattoo that goes down my spine that says pain is temporary. So they did the first surgery in February of 13. They did a laminectomy and a discectomy. They went in, a little 2-inch incision, and took out fragments of disc that were floating around in my spinal column and shaved down bone and ligament so that my sciatic nerve had room. What was happening was I would get spasms randomly without warning that could last seconds or minutes, up to like 40 of minutes, where basically it felt like electricity was going from my right butt cheek down to my right calf and trying to rip my calf off of my leg. Wow. Excruciating pain. I could not stand up straight without a cane. I could not drive. I could not walk. I could not get dressed. I could not roll over in bed.
How old were you, Steve?
Right knee and my armpit.
How old were you, Steve, when this happened?
I was 30. Well, it was 7 years ago that I had the surgeries. I'm 42 now, so
about 35.
35.
Okay, so
yep.
So 35, for all accounts, 35-year-old man, still a very young man, and having to require a cane to be able to move around. That's serious. I mean, you know, not to get too far sidetracked, but, you know, what were your thoughts? Were you scared? You know, were you concerned that this is the way that I'm going to be for the rest of my life?
Well, I was going to PT, and my physical therapy guy was amazing because I had back injuries a couple of times through my career, but just like little spasms and stuff like that, and he was able to snap, crack, pop me into the right spot, and he got me going pretty good. And I remember the day where he's like, dude, you're going to get cut. He's like, I can't even fix you. I was going to PT like 4 days a week.